Hey everybody, what is up? My name is Martin and welcome to 2K Central. So today I'm doing the second character related video, and based on a request from you guys, this one is centered around our Italian friend, Vito Scaletta. Alright, so considering there's so much information on Vito due to the fact that he was the protagonist of Mafia 2, and to avoid doing a complete recap of that game, that can be a separate video if you guys want, if you really want it. Instead, I'm choosing 6 things about him that are somewhat relevant to Mafia 3. So here are 6 things you might not know about him. Number 1, he's Italian. Alright, so a little bit of background. If the name doesn't give it away, Vito was born in Sicily in 1925. When he was 7, he and his family moved to the fictional city of Empire Bay, which is based in America. So currently he's 42 years old, leading a small Italian mob in Mafia 3, which is based in New Orleans. He's one of 3 allies for Lincoln, but based on our in-game choices, Lincoln and Vito's relationship can improve or break down. I feel like I say that so much. And if you place him on multiple territories, he offers you a unique special ability. The only one that has been confirmed is the possibility of calling in Iron Muscle. So similar to Burke removing your wanted level with a phone call. Whenever you're in a tight situation or there's a specific mission that you could do with reinforcements for, give Vito a call and he'll send some Italian foot soldiers your way. Number 2, he's a war veteran. When Vito first arrived in America, he soon met the legend himself, Joe, and they became best friends. During their teenage years, they turned to a life of crime in order to make some quick cash and due to lack of opportunity in America. But Vito is soon arrested during a robbery and is given a choice: go to jail or join the army. He chooses to join the army and is sent to Sicily during World War II to assist in Operation Husky, which is basically to free Sicily. He does make a small contribution to the battle but is soon wounded and is sent home on leave. As he returns to Empire Bay, he's greeted by Joe, who informs him that he's no longer required to serve in the army thanks to his connections from within the mob. So this is something Vito and Lincoln Clay have in common. They're both war veterans who have been discharged from the army and returned from a war to their childhood friends who have already established themselves within a mob, and they are in need of a favour. Number 3, he spent more time in jail. So a little bit of background for people who haven't played Mafia 2. Vito was in prison during that game while working for the Clementi family, one of the major families in Empire Bay. Vito is given a job which involves sneaking into a government office and stealing gas ration stamps. This job eventually leads to Vito being sentenced to 10 years inside a federal prison. But whilst in prison, he has a major clash with a man named Brian O'Neill, a key member of the Irish mob. Vito eventually kills him, which causes tension with the Irish later in the game. So this could add an interesting dynamic between Burke and Vito. Burke has history with the Italians and really hates them, and Vito isn't that much of a fan of the Irish in general. So just a little heads up, that's a relationship to look out for in Mafia 3. But through the killing of Brian O'Neill, Vito makes his most powerful connection, a man called Leo Galenti, who's a vastly experienced mobster, and Leo teaches Vito the ways of the mob. He's kind of like Vito's version of Yoda, and Leo also takes about 4 years off Vito's sentence. And somewhere within the previous 17 years since Mafia 2, our good friend Vito has actually spent more time in prison. What has he done now? Alright, so the crime he got committed for is currently unknown, and as is the duration he spent in jail. But it could be a major reason why he's chosen to move away from Empire Bay to New Orleans. There's a possibility that his life has somewhat fallen apart due to loss of wealth, and his reputation has declined during his time in prison. Number 4, he has a point to prove. So in Mafia 3, Vito is a 42-year-old Italian gangster starting over in New Orleans, and based on the Mafia 3 wiki, Vito currently lives a mundane, average life in the city as he works in a fish restaurant. Now, we all know Vito, and the average life is not for him.
The working man's a sucker, that's for damn sure.
You said it.
Done.
Yeah, I'm done. And you can keep the $10. When I said I needed a job, I didn't mean slave labor.
So this kind of shows you the power of Sal Marcano. If he can force an established mobster like Vito to work with nothing but a fish restaurant, then Sal literally controls the whole city at the beginning of Mafia 3. Still doesn't stop Vito, he's running a small Italian mob within the city, and it's highly likely that his reasons for working in this fish restaurant during the day is to keep a low profile. But it's interesting, he's literally working from the bottom to the top again. And the fastest way he sees to do this is by joining forces with Lincoln Clay, Cassandra and Burke. Number 5, he is extremely loyal. So throughout Mafia 2, Vito showcased how loyal he is to friends and family. Anyone who placed their trust in him, he in return did everything he could to help them with their circumstances. Example 1, when Vito returns from the army, he learns that his deceased father had left his mother and sister in overwhelming debt. He immediately takes responsibility by attempting to pay it off, and the only way he can see to do this is by returning to a life of crime. So he and Joe get a few jobs from the Clemente family, which consisted of stealing, more stealing, and eventually Vito is hired to assassinate a man named Sidney Penn. Yep, that'll do it. So Vito is successful in this and is paid $2,000 for this hit. He then gives this money to his sister to repay his father's debt. Another example of his loyalty comes when Vito's boss, Carlo Falcone, places a hit on Leo Galante. A man named Henry is given a job to assassinate Leo to prove his worth. Vito goes with him, and due to his previous history with Leo, Vito helps him escape instead. So despite the possibility of jeopardizing his relationship within his own family, he chose to help an old friend. And finally, throughout the game, Vito showed nothing but loyalty to his best friend Joe. Number 6. He is motivated by money and status. Now, Vito being motivated mostly by money and status is possibly the biggest negative aspect of his personality. In Mafia 2, Vito is a young man, so it's understandable why he wants to make it big in life, but the majority of the time he fails to look at the bigger picture or think of the consequences for his actions, especially when he needs money. Which is why we, the Mafia 2 fans, love him. It makes him more human. But when Vito finally made it in Empire Bay, he was rich and bought the house he dreamed of, but it all came crashing down thanks to the damn Irish. Awkward. They burned his home in retaliation for the killing of Brian O'Neill. Vito lost everything, was desperate for money, so he agreed to a drug deal with Henry and Joe. So they sold drugs to the triads behind their boss's back in the hope of a huge payday. It was a success at first, but the triads soon discover that Henry is an FBI informant. So they brutally murder him, take the money, and Vito, who is furious against his better judgment, joins Joe and storms the Red Dragon, which is their HQ, and they kill every triad in the building to avenge Henry. And this decision causes a war between the triads and the remaining Mafia families, which eventually leads to the possible death of his best friend Joe. So Vito does have the possibility of poor choices due to his motivation for money and his loyalty to his friends. It's somewhat of a weakness in this business. And it's worth noting for Mafia 3 that it's been 17 years and Vito could have learned from his mistakes that there is no place for friends when you're in this business. So the fact that we are playing as Link and Clay, that could be something to look out for. Now unfortunately there isn't any other information regarding Vito's role in Mafia 3 or his reasons for being there. As I said, he's lost the majority of his wealth and status, so he's rebuilding his life in New Orleans to some extent. But he's still an established criminal who has loads of experience to offer. One thing I wanted to mention, I've seen some people worry about this, Hangar 13 have confirmed on multiple occasions that loose ends from Mafia 2 will be addressed. And the biggest loose end is what happened to Joe at the end of Mafia 2, so for those who are worried that they won't reveal what happened to Joe, do not worry, I'm 100% sure they will. And that's actually a question I offer to you guys. How do you want them to handle that reveal? What is your dream scenario, I guess? As I said before, the best way to reveal what happened to Joe is through a flashback in which we, the player, control Vito for one last time right where Mafia 2 left off. Oh, man can dream. Unfortunately, we've come to the conclusion of this video, guys. I hope this video was somewhat beneficial and you learned a little about Vito Scaletta. The next character related video will be centered around Link and Clay. That one might be a little more obvious, but it'll help hype the game and give people as much information as possible related to Lincoln.